So, good morning, everyone, to this wonderful CAAASA event. My name is Cornell Ellis. I will be your facilitator this afternoon, and this will be the most that you'll hear from me. I will do the honor of introducing and reading a short bio of each of our panelists today. And this is the room for increasing strategies for a Black male teacher pipeline. I am the co-founder and executive director of an organization in Kansas City, Missouri that focuses on increasing Black male educators. And this is an important passion of mine. It's my life's work. And so I'm honored to be with today Dr. Edward Bush. He will be your moderator. Dr. Edward Bush is an innovative leader with over 21 years of experience in higher education, with 18 of those years in the California community college system. Dr. Bush is well known and respected for his exceptional leadership and research on issues related to student success, equity, diversity, and leadership. Dr. Bush holds a PhD in urban educational leadership from Claremont Graduate University, a master's degree in public administration, and a bachelor's of arts degree in political science. Dr. Bush currently serves as the president of Consumes River College in Sacramento, California. I'm sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. His professional career includes vice president of student services, dean of student services, tenured associate faculty member and student activities, director of the Educational Talent Search, Federal TRIO grant, and adjunct professor for several graduate programs. Dr. Bush serves on numerous college, district, and statewide committees and is active in community organizations, including serving on the board for 4 nonprofit foundations. Dr. Bush is a scholar practitioner. He has devoted his time to developing programs and services that foster student success and students, as well as creating successful targeted programs for historically underserved populations. He is the co-author of The Plan, a guide for women raising African-American boys from conception to college, and the co-author of The African-American Male Theory. Dr. Bush has published 3 book chapters and 10 peer-reviewed publications. In addition, Dr. Bush is a founder and board member of A2Mend, African American Male Network and Development Incorporated. A2Mend is a nonprofit organization that is comprised of African American male administrators who volunteer their scholarly and professional expertise to foster institutional change within the community college system. Thank you, Dr. Bush, for all that you do, and join us virtually for giving him a hand. And now for the panelists. Dr. Tyrone Howard was not with us yet, is that correct?
That's correct.
Great, we'll skip him. Dr. Travis Bristol is an assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley's Graduate School of Education. Dr. Bristol's research is situated at the intersection of teacher policy and practice. Using qualitative methods, he explores 3 interrelated foci. 1, national, state, and local policies that enable and constrain teacher workplace experiences and retention. 2, district and school-based educator professional learning communities. And 3, the intersection of race and gender in schools. To date, he has published 30 publications, which includes peer-reviewed journal articles, book chapters, policy reports, and opinion editorials. Dr. Bristol is on the board of directors of Teach Plus, the National Center for Teacher Residencies, and the East Bay School for Boys. Join me in giving Dr. Bristol a warm welcome. Next, we have Chris Chatmon. He's the CEO of Kingmakers in Oakland. Christopher Chatmon, again, is the CEO of Kingmakers in Oakland. Chatmon founded KOO and served as the first executive director of the African American Male Achievement, AAMA, for the Oakland Unified School District, UOSD, and was named as a leader to learn from by Education Week magazine. Chatmon was selected as a campaign for Black Male Achievement Social Innovation Accelerator because he is committed to improving life outcomes for all youth, and especially African American males. Chatmon is passionate about uplifting the African American community and has dedicated his career and life work to creating pathways of success within Oakland and beyond. Prior to working with UOSD, Chatmon was the principal of an alternative high school in San Francisco and the executive director of urban services at the YMCA in Oakland for over 10 years. Chatmon served his career in education, teaching history and physical education in the San Francisco Unified School District. Chatmon earned a MA in education and a secondary teaching credential in social science from Brown University. He also holds a BS in psychology with a minor in physical education from San Francisco State University. Join us in welcoming Mr. Chris Chatmon. And last, but certainly not least, Debra Moore Washington. Debra Moore Washington is the president of the Black Student Union, retired superintendent of human resources, and is in her third year as the president of United Black Student Union, whose motto is 45 years strong. Served over 10,000 students through union activities, and her goal is to motivate students and prepare them for college and careers. Once again, I am honored to be around all of these esteemed educators. Dr. Bush, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Cornell. I appreciate you covering those introductions, and it just reinforces, I think, the power of the panelists that we have before us today. And so I am excited to be able to hear from each of these scholars and practitioners to help provide concrete strategies around how we can begin to address the lack of African-American male teachers that are educators in the K-12 system. So I am really excited, and I hope you share my excitement as we begin this important dialogue. So I immediately want to turn it over to our first panelist, Dr. Bristol, who is going to take some time to set the context for our conversation today and also give us some data around this particular issue. So Dr. Bristol, please.
Thank you, Dr. Bush. I'm just going to share my screen. See, I have a lot of things on my screen. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, so what I'd like to do here is just very briefly talk about some of the research that I've been conducting over the past 8 years on Black male teachers, and I'll end very briefly with some implications for California. So first, in this piece, I begin with science, and I talk about the clear evidence base for the added value of Latinx and Black teachers for Latinx and Black students. And so here I detail both the research that suggests that there is a benefit in terms of the social and emotional development for Black students if they have a Black teacher. And I make I highlight some of the evidence, some of the research around increased learning, attendance, long-term outcomes for Black students if they have a Black teacher. In particular, some of the work that I talk about is how Black teachers draw on Black students' diverse cultural and linguistic experiences to increase engagement and learning. That's the qualitative research. And then I highlight several studies, many of which I suspect many of our participants and audience members are aware of, around the quantitative research that draws some clear connection to increased learning, decreases in suspension and expulsion, and the likelihood of even graduating from high school if Black students have a Black teacher. So there's a clear evidence base, and I highlight this in some of my research. I also talk about, and I think it's important to mention, that Black male teachers aren't only good for Black boys, they're good for all children who live in this diverse and interconnected society. In the state of California, 4% of all teachers are Black, while 6% of teachers are Black, and 1% of all teachers in the state of California are Black men. And so there is some clear ethno-racial mismatch between Black children and Black teachers. The largest gap, I think it's important to note, is between Latinx teachers and Latinx students. But in the context of what we're talking about here, I think it's important to know that 1% of all male teachers in the state of California are Black men. And some of my work has also highlighted, given that there is a clear evidence base for having, for Black students to have a Black teacher, I talk about, well, some of the school-based experiences of Black male teachers. There's lots of evidence around how Black boys experience schools, and I make some clear connections between the experiences of Black boys and how they experience schools and their Black male teachers. In this piece, I talk about the experiences of boundary heightening for Black male teachers. And in particular, I talk about how Black male teachers are seen and perceived as the de facto disciplinarian. And so here, this elementary school Black male teacher who was teaching kindergarten says that his colleagues used to bring 5th grade students to my classroom to keep them. At a point, I told them this is not working because these students should be taking the state standardized exam, it's called MCAASE, and keeping them with 5-year-olds is wasting their time. And so many of the Black male teachers in my study talked about how their colleagues saw them as a de facto disciplinarian, always bringing quote unquote troubled Black boys to their classrooms. And here you have 5th graders sitting in classrooms in a kindergarten classroom because the other teachers in the school did not know how to engage and support learning for Black boys. Some of my, this more recent piece published in 2020 looks at the school-based experiences for Black male teachers who are the only Black men in their building, and I compare them, the experiences of the lone Black male teacher to Black male teachers teaching in schools with multiple Black teachers. And I find, and I'm in particular, I'm interested in one outcome, and that's turnover, right? So do Black men who are in schools by themselves turn over at a higher degree than Black men who are in schools with multiple Black male teachers? And what I found is that even though Black men who were by themselves did not, they stayed in schools, even though they had more challenging experiences. They talked about increased social isolation, increased microaggression, that the lone Black male teacher, that he was more likely to stay in his school because schools that had just one Black male teacher had better working conditions. Those schools had students who did better on standardized exams, had more white students, had more higher income students. And so those schools had quote unquote better working conditions. This one Black male teacher said, I taught 90 kids when I was teaching at my first school, and I had so much grading to do. Right now I teach only about 50 kids. We call our school the country club. I mean, many of the teachers who are here worked elsewhere, and they had heavy workloads. I spent the entire summer developing this curriculum. Schools that had just one Black male teacher also talked about having autonomy over their teaching, and so they were more likely to stay. When compared to schools that had many more Black male teachers, those teachers were more likely to leave. Dante Little talked about when he was about to administer the state exam, he had collected all the cell phones from his students. The assistant principal walks into his classroom, a Black woman asks, and if the cell phones had been collected, not believing that they had, in the middle of the exam, begins to stop and frisk students' backpacks to see if all the cell phones had been collected. Dante Little says, even if you were trying to do the right thing, you're going to be harassed and treated like a criminal for no reason. And I'm like, done with it. This isn't a prison. We can't run it like a prison. We can't treat our kids like they are criminals, especially when they are not doing anything wrong. It creates tension. No one wants to be here. I'm just like done with it. Personally, I'm over with it. And Dante eventually leaves not only his school, but the teaching profession. And so in this last piece, and I won't necessarily go into detail, but I talk about if we're going to design a Black male teacher initiative in the state of California, it has to be a comprehensive teacher diversity initiative. And here I give the story of Jamal, quote unquote, in a 51st state. So in an imagined state, what would it look like to have a teacher, to have a program that really takes into account the life course of a teacher. And any such initiative has to hit at post-secondary education, recruitment and selection, teacher preparation, entry into the profession, induction, and ongoing support. And so I would encourage individuals, if you have time, to look at this last piece, because I think it provides some thought experiment around how such a pipeline could look. And so with that, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bristol. Oh my gosh. I mean, great research. Thank you for setting the tone for our conversation. For these attendees, as you begin to think through your questions, you could go ahead and put it in the chat. We're going to have each of the panelists share for a couple of minutes, then the remainder of the time is going to be dedicated to answering your questions. And when you put your questions in the chat, if it's being directed at a particular panelist, please indicate that in your question as well. It's good to see you, Dr. Howard. We did introductions in the beginning. So if you can, before you go into your comments, maybe give a brief background about yourself, and then go ahead and move forward with your thoughts around the Black male teacher pipeline.
Thank you, Dr. Bush. Forgive me for joining late, had some technical difficulties there. My name is Tyrone Howard, professor of education at UCLA, director of the UCLA Pritzker for Strengthening Children and Families, also the UCLA Black Male Institute, as well as the Center for the Transformation of Schools, former classroom teacher in the Compton Unified School District. Honored to be part of the panel this morning with this distinguished group of change agents, and really want to chime in much of what I heard Dr. Bristol talk about, who was doing some important, I think, really sort of paradigm shift in research looking at this very topic. I just want to use my time to really kind of outline 3 core areas that I think we need to be mindful of if we're going to really do something different when we think about Black male teacher pipeline. And point number 1, I think we have to understand sort of the complexity of this issue. And this first topic I would address is that we need to understand that the current experiences that Black males have in schools today are going to have a profound experience on whether or not they ever want to see this as a profession that they will pursue down the line. Far too many young men are saying, why would I go into this profession when these are some of the very folks who just really created angst and anxiety and turmoil and tragedy and just made my living existence hell. So why would I ultimately want to be like those people or being in the spaces that they see? So I think we have to understand that the more that Black boys see positive, encouraging leaders and change agents like Brother Chris, who's here, I think that increases the likelihood that they will see this as a pipeline that they will pursue. So in so many ways, what we model is what our young men will ultimately want to see in terms of, or not see in terms of thinking about this as a profession. I also maintain this, part of this first point, I always say to young men, that's the very reason why we need you in this profession, because we don't want another generation of young Black men to have to be subjected to some of the same kinds of mistreatment, miseducation, hostilities that young Black boys are facing in schools today. So we need you to be part of the solution. So we have to reframe the way we talk about and think about what it means to be a teacher, because I think there's a big misperception, and it comes from some truth. Let me be clear about that, because again, if your experiences with teachers have been largely negative, you're not going to want to see this as something you will pursue. So again, thinking about the experience that young Black boys have in schools is number 1. Second piece I think we have to be really intentional about, especially here in a state like California. We oftentimes sit back and wait to see if Black men will come to apply for our teaching positions. We have to be much more intentional in going out to recruit and pursue Black men in this profession. Look, I see colleges and universities do all kinds of recruiting efforts when they want our young men to be on our football teams, when they want them to be on our basketball teams. We identify them in 7th and 8th grade. We shower them with letters. We text them. We call them. We tell them how great they are. We tell them how much we want them there. We have a formula for what it takes to get Black men on campus when it comes to increasing the university's bottom line. It's that same playbook that I think that needs to be used to get these young men into our teacher preparation programs. We know where young Black men are. I just don't buy this narrative that there are no Black men on colleges across this campus. You can go down to Atlanta to the AUC complex. You can go to Morehouse. You can go to Clark. There are Black men there for days. My son became a classroom teacher because he was a student at Morehouse College. He said schools came and set up shop on their campus and they pitched them every single day. Here's why you need to teach. Here's why you make a difference. Here's why you be someone that we really think could be a part of the change that we want to see. And they just showered them with recruitment and love. And so they went to the places where young Black men are. And we know that's a huge way to tell these young men that they're desired, that they're wanted, that they can make a difference. So we can't sit back and say, well, none apply. Well, the question is, did you go out to where they are? Did you go to places like Cal State Dominguez? Did you go to places like East Bay? Did you go to places where you know the numbers of young Black men are higher than they are in other places? So that'd be my second place. Go where they are, and they will come if we do this the right way. And then the third and final point that I would raise, and this one is a big one, it's much more complicated. We have to take a real important step on dismantling the barriers that are in the pathway to teacher certification. And by that, what I mean is that there are far too many obstacles that make it difficult for credentialing to occur. We know that the CBEST and the CSET are necessary evils in this process. We look at our data at UCLA. The CSET is typically the stumbling block for far too many of our teachers who we know have a tremendous amount of experience working with young people, tremendous engagement in schools, are really connected and part of these communities. But then we have the CSET becomes a big challenge just to get into a teacher education program. And then once you are in a teacher preparation program, all the other different requirements, the RECA, the teaching events and models, all these things that don't really capture the sort of the essence, the love, the care and concern of what we know is what our young Black boys would bring to, young Black men would bring to the teaching process. I think we need to reconfigure, rethink, and perhaps sort of throw out some of these different mechanisms that are in place, because not only are they stumbling blocks, but they are costly financial stumbling blocks, because we know it's a cottage industry to take these exams over and over again, and they're not cheap. In some cases, we got young folks paying $300-400 per time they take these exams. And if you've taken it 3 or 4 times and you still not pass, I'm already $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 in the hole. Why would I keep pursuing this pathway if it's going to continue to tell me that I'm not fit to be it? So I think we've got to think about those 3 areas to begin to really think differently about this, changing the way we think about how young boys, young Black men experience schools. Secondly, going to where they are. And 3, removing those huge obstacles in the credentialing process that weeds out far too many of our bright, brilliant young brothers.
Excellent, 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 Dr. Howard, as always. Next, we want to move to Debbie Washington.
Well, good morning. I think my comments really are going to mirror what my previous panelists have spoken about. I am with the United Black Student Unions of California currently, and that organization has a long history in developing teens. So when you think about going to where they are, high school is kind of where they're starting. So over 40 years, we have mentored over 10,000 students who have come through our programs, and we have had those students work with us in colleges and university connections and visits. So I do have a PowerPoint that just has a few slides on it. I wonder if Mr. Ellis could bring that up.
Yep, whenever you're ready. You ready now?
I'm ready.
Okay. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah. So if you want this, yeah, perfect.
So you just let me know when you're ready to switch, and I will click the slide for you.
Thank you so much, sir. We are 46 years strong now. Last year was our 45th year. We are in Northern, Southern, and Central California. You can see up at the top right, if you can see that map, it gives you an idea of what encompasses Southern California. And then of course, there's Central and Northern. The students that work with us, they actually have opportunities to participate and to develop and grow in areas of leadership. There's networking around the state and with businesses and mentors, colleges, motivation, and just overall readiness. On the next slide, you'll see that we have hundreds of students that participate each year in our conventions. And to the left, that flyer that you see was the convention that unfortunately got waylaid because of COVID this past March, but that would have been our 46th actual live and in-person 3-day convention for high school students. We work under 3 major initiatives, and these initiatives are voted on, so they're in place until 2022. One is a BSU at every school. The other is voter registration at the teenage year. So we've got campaigns going on our campuses at high schools. And the third one is college engagement, and that's in all aspects. So when we work with our young people and we have our events with young people, we are doing them and hosting them on college campuses. We also have, as part of our students' vision, 3 areas that they wanted to focus on, and one is ethnic studies. They'd like to see ethnic studies as a graduation requirement, so that's one of our initiatives. Financial literacy for every student, and then the pipeline for Black male educators. If you look at the next slide now, please. I wanted to just give you a quick snapshot of what our work looks like when we are actually in the field. So in a minute, you're going to see just a short 45-second little clip, and it comes from larger videos that we have available on YouTube, et cetera, if you are interested. But what you're going to see here is our students engaged with Congresswoman Karen Bass. When she did our roundtable, she facilitated that for us. You'll see them at Sac State, at LMU, you'll see them at UC Santa Barbara. You'll see them engaged in, as you see now, they're at our scholarship banquet, which is always hosted by the hotel where we host our conference. And then you'll also see a Pulitzer Prize winner who is presenting a keynote to our students. So this gives you a little snapshot of what UBSUC does every year for 46 years. If you'll go ahead and play the video. I'm not hearing the sound. Cornell, I'm not hearing the sound.
Yeah, okay, maybe, yeah, now that I unmuted myself, maybe it'll work. Let's try it again. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
So if you're not sure if you're ready, are we good now? Yeah.
For college students to go back into the high schools. I'm going to show you guys like the EE building and some of the labs in there, and then we'll come around and also see the UU lecture. Try to discover who you really are through vision of what you can become.
Thank you. Okay, on slide 4, the question then is, what can UBSUC do, and what can we bring to the conversation about the creation of a pipeline? And we think that there are several areas that we could help address. One is access, insight, connections, infrastructure, and also student voice. So we do work with these students every day. There are meetings every week. There are events that happen 3 or 4 times throughout the school year on the regional level and the state level. And there are events that are happening locally at the school sites. So our advisors are working with the students all the time. We have access to the students. We counsel and mentor them. So we talk with them about career aspirations. And this is one way we can start to infuse the conversation about the need for males as educators. We also have a statewide infrastructure. We are local in Southern California and in Central and Northern California. There are presidents in each of those areas. Kashawn Thorntuna is in Northern California. Elizabeth Garman is in Central. And so the infrastructure that we built with our roundtables, our regional conferences, our statewide conventions, our initiatives, and our actions that we take every year, I think hold us in good stead if we wanted to really work on infusing the idea of a pipeline at the high school level. We have mentors. Our students are working with both male and female advisors. And we bring in mentors from colleges, from 100 Black men from other areas, and they serve as role models for our students. In addition to that, those professionals that are running the organization with the students bring in all of their experiences, including college counseling, career counseling, myself as HR administration, working on recruitment and retention of African American staff. All of those things we think would be a help if we were talking about what this might look like. And then BSU done right. BSU is not a club. It has a purpose. And done systemically with organization, with networks, with affinity groups, we have the ability to reach out to young people and help steer and direct their careers. And then the last thing that I would mention on this slide is we're looking at the whole student. So academic excellence is, of course, one of our important areas of focus, but then there's also leadership, cultural awareness, and then looking at what life is going to look like for the future. So the next slide. We have several events that are coming up that I think might be of interest to schools or people that might be listening to this. So some of those events are listed here. But most importantly, I think we are working with partners in our community. We have advocates that help us to meet our mission and our purpose. And in order to work with them and in working with them, we have also found an alliance with CAAASA. So CAAASA has said, well, maybe there is an entry level where you work with students on a foundational level all the time. Maybe there's an entry level that we could use to help us to bring about this pipeline that will have more Black male educators in our system. And so the UBSUC is ready and stands poised to engage in this conversation and to assist in any way we can. I know that several of us, including myself, I've been a consultant in the area of recruitment and retention of African American teachers and African American administrators. Bringing many into the field and then making sure that they stay in the field is one thing that is critically important for us. What we do find is there's an inherent challenge for African American educators as they come into the field in order to get that tenure, to get to stay in the field, be retained, and also to recruit others. So one of the things that we were thinking about that UBSUC might do is to be a part of a circle. And in a part of that circle, what would happen is we would start perhaps at the high school, working with students on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and in our overall conferences and conventions. And then seeing those that choose to move on to support that they receive in colleges and universities. And then very critical is support that we would provide in those first couple of years while they are looking to be retained as administrators or retained as teachers. And then having those same folks circle back to work with a new cohort of young high school students that may be interested or may be guided into thinking about education as a possible career. So BSU is ready to enter into the conversation, and we thank you for the invitation.
Awesome work, Dr. Washington. We appreciate everything you're doing with our students to build the pipeline. Also, for the panelists, if you can monitor the chat, when we finish up with this first round, we're going to be up against time and not going to be able to probably get in a lot of questions at that moment. But our attendees are putting questions in the chat. If you're able to just respond via chat, that will help to make sure that we cover more ground in regards to the question. Last but not least, it's my privilege now to bring up Brother Chris Chatmon. Chris.
Greetings, everybody. Greetings, distinguished panel, CAAASA community. My name is Chris Chatmon. I am one of the co-founders of Kingmakers of Oakland and the president and CEO. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you all. Hopefully this can work. And I'll try to run this as tight as I can in light of the time. Really, Brother Tyrone, Dr. Howard, you just had me ashaing over here, brother, because so much of what you had to say was right on point with what I have to share with everybody today. So let me go back to the beginning. And I'm having a little tech difficulty. Bear with me. All right, here we go. So again, Chris Chatmon, I bring greetings from Oakland, California. Really launched this model and theory of action 10 years ago in Oakland Unified School District as the founding executive director of African American Male Achievement. The charge was to increase educational and life outcomes for Black boys from preschool through 12th grade, while dismantling the systems, structures, conditions, and the culture that perpetuates and fuels the school to prison pipeline. We've codified that theory of action and now have launched that as Kingmakers of Oakland, where we work with districts across the country. The frame of healing the fish while treating the toxic ecosystem posits there's nothing wrong with Black boys, Black children, but we send them into a system that the longer they stay in, really the more diminished they become in this system. And so again, we really inoculate our kings while we deal with the heaviest load, and that's adult mindsets and white supremacy and Eurocentricity, what lends itself to the toxic ecosystem. And I'll go deep here today is school culture and conditions, harsh discipline policies. I'll go deep around unequipped teachers, biased curriculum, the Eurocentric curriculum from preschool through 12th grade that is made manifest in language arts, mathematics, science, and history that perpetuates this hegemonic capitalistic Eurocentric value system, as well as the discrimination and criminalization from negative media portrayal. That feeds and fuels the school to prison pipeline. The 6 drivers that we codified in Oakland Unified School District, now we work with districts across the country, primarily in the state of California, Washington, and Illinois. One is around culturally relevant curriculum and the pedagogical practices. 2, Black male teacher, creating a critical mass of Black male teachers, of which I'll go into our strategies around recruiting, training, and retaining Black male teachers. Youth voice and youth leadership. The reality is many of us on this call are not going to be the ones that will see the dismantling of structural racism within these systems. It will be our kings, our students. And so we must activate their agency and voice at every opportunity. We also, as one of our drivers in dismantling structural racism disguised as public school systems, is how we see families and communities as assets. So how we work with school districts to work with parents as assets and as partners, as well as begin to see the assets in the African community, the Pan-African community, the African-American community, and align those assets to accelerate academic performance and educational outcomes for Black boys. Narrative change. Public school systems work in crisis communication and reactionary communication and perpetuate the problem of practice versus the promise of practice. And lastly, which binds all of these things, is policy. And those are our 6 drivers that we work with districts presently. I'll go deeper now around Black male teacher recruitment, training, and retention. But just to let you know, we work with some 70+ teachers a month, led by one of our co-founders, Brother Bayan Bakari and Brother Jerome Gourdine, where we got facilitators in the state of California, Washington, and Illinois. This is just a small group. That's my son right there, King Jordan. That was in the Malcolm X room at McClymonds. Strategies, and again, I'm going to complement much of what's said, in particular what Brother Tyrone said. Recruiting African-American male educators, it starts with increasing how we value Black teachers in our community and society. Our children should revere, aspire, and celebrate Black teachers the way we celebrate our athletes and musicians. This will change when the adults change what we value. If our children, our kings and queens, saw our teachers rolling in the best cars, living in the baddest houses, having the best seats in restaurants, I'll kid you not, our young kings and queens will be scratching to get at the opportunity to become a teacher. 2, look beyond the conventional teacher pool to find African-American men who are working in the community and at school sites and other capacities. So where we see some of our extraordinary curators of the culture are our artists, our kings and queens leading in youth development, Our coaches have some of the most powerful pedagogical practices to keep definitely more than 30 or 40 Kings actively engaged through a season and through a school year. After school program providers, behavioral support providers, but those folks are in immediate access to helping them transition from that domain into the structure of public schools. I want to pick up also on what Brother Tyrone shared, is that when we launched the work back in 2010, and for our brothers that are nested in Pan-Africanism, African cosmology, and understand the contributions throughout the African diaspora, many of which said, why would I go into the belly of the beast, give up what I know and hold to be true, and take up the white man's knowledge, content, and metrics of accomplishment? And so I say that to say that we have to begin to look at different metrics and bend what it is that we value in these systems to create and curate a place and space where conscious brothers and sisters actually can manifest their greatness in public school systems. 3, explore districts' policies around credentialing, emergency credentialing, and what our innovation was really leveraging the CTE process to expand the range of individuals from which African-American male teachers may emerge. 4, cultivate a relationship with colleges, community colleges, where non-credentialed individuals may earn CTEs, and create an incubator to support cohorts of teachers to move through the CTE program together. 5, leverage social networks and encourage school administrators, teachers, and especially other African-American male teachers to recruit friends, colleagues, and community members who they think have the potential to be transformative educators. Another group of kings and queens I want to acknowledge, 97-year-old Oscar Wright. That's the brother and center that much of what our work was tethered on his legacy. And if we look to our history and her story and really find that the cure is in our culture through extraordinary educators that came before us, we will go and accelerate this pipeline for Black teachers in present day. Training and development of African-American male teachers, transformative educators must continue to evolve in the following areas. Pedagogical skills, don't hate, differentiate. Skills for promoting positive classroom culture and climate. We must understand the cure is in the culture. And when we perpetuate white supremacy through these traditional based pedagogical practices, we are fueling and feeding the school to prison pipeline. 3, skills for maintaining a strength-based approach. We have an asset-based model. We don't do classroom management, we do leadership development. Systems advocacy skills. Have to know how to navigate white supremacy, Eurocentricity, and structural racism. Actually, contrary to our brother Dr. Bristol had shared, our teachers in our domain of work that were isolated actually had a higher level of trauma and isolation, given the burden of having to be all things to everybody. And so what we found was the more that we can connect our African-American male teachers and female teachers to cohorts and a broader community, that was the balm that helped them move forward and maintain their passion, purpose, and profession. A commitment to learning and deepening their understanding around Pan-Africanism and bringing that knowledge into all aspects of instruction. So just because we are Black, male or female, if we're still perpetuating Eurocentricity, if we're still using the old school of do as I say, then we're no better off than our white counterparts. And so we have to evolve out of this Eurocentric narrative and lift up the cultural prosperity of Blackness and African contributions throughout the diaspora in language arts, math, science, and history. One-to-one coaching we found was another way to help support the acceleration and development of our teachers. And in the spirit of Ubuntu, this idea and concept of collective genius. And so bringing brothers together, be it first year, second year, 10 year, or 20 year, and sharing space where we could share our lesson plans, differentiate and talk about when we have good days and bad days was another strategy to accelerate learning, teaching effectiveness. Steps for developing African-American male educators, and I'll just pick a few because I know our time is short. Let's see, let's go to building in time for teachers to develop their own social emotional skills and or system advocacy skills as is appropriate, given the structure of your program and educational institution. So just as much as there's an assault on the Black mind, spirit, and body of our kings from preschool to 12th grade, there's no different assault for Black teachers, for classified staff, for principals. And so we have to support our leaders in public school institutions around how do we hold face, how do we support one another? So the idea of culturally responsive, transformative SEL is very important to their self-efficacy. Lastly, number 5, building a structure for on-site observation and coaching. So this idea of opening up our classroom and allowing brothers and sisters to come in and give input, acknowledge greatness, is also a way to accelerate the development of our teachers. Close these last 3 things in terms of retention. The professional learning community is very important to maintain the pedagogy of brotherhood, morale, provide lessons and emphasis on self-care. What we have found is systems of oppression not only self-correct, but they castlefy some of our most extraordinary teachers. So it's important that we are supporting our kings and queens in the teaching profession on mental health and mindfulness. And lastly, intentionality, building racial justice and social justice. So it's not just about academic rigor. It's also ensuring that our kings or queens are coming out with a level of consciousness, not only for self-sufficiency, but to go back into the community and support the next generation. So I'll close with that and give it back to Dr. Bush.
Brother Chris, excellent. Man, we appreciate that. As the chat indicated, folks are vibing, saying fire, and we all agree. Great information. So let's begin to tackle some questions that we have a couple of minutes. One of the things I do want to add and pick up also from Dr. Howard, you mentioned, said, go where they are. And oftentimes we focus on students who are attending 4-year institutions, but we know when we look at African-American male enrollment in public post-secondary institutions in California, 75% of African-American men are enrolled in California community colleges. So we cannot address the pipeline issue if we ignore the Black men that are attending our community colleges, particularly at the time where they're beginning to form their thoughts about their career choices. And if we wait till those students transfer to 4-year institutions, then they already have made up their mind about what career paths they want to go into. And so I just wanted to build on that idea of going where our students are and elevating the Black male students who are enrolled in our California community colleges. With that, Brother Cornelius, I think you synthesized a set of questions that you may have want the panelists to address first in our time. So if you go ahead and pose that question to the panelists.
Yeah, I think that there was a lot of responses and questions that came across over the course of the time that we had together. But I think that one that kind of culminates and also kind of gives us a moment to wrap up is this idea or this question of what do we need to see change, or what is a mindset that needs to change, or what needs to change in society for us to actually see some success in increasing the Black male educator population.
And Cornelius, as our panelists are gathering their thoughts, there's a lot of questions of folks asking about the slides or where the information would be available.
Yeah.
This session is being recorded. So with that recording, you will be able to see the slides that were presented. I think it will be up to each individual panelist how they want to share their slide deck. But this recording, this is being recorded.
And I would say too that if you all panelists are feeling comfortable with it, to drop their email addresses into the chat so that people that are interested in specific information or specific panelists can reach out individually.
And with that, Cornell, summarize the question again, and then I'll direct it one of the panelists.
What needs to change in society in order to increase the amount of Black male educators inside of the education profession?
All right, thank you. Anyone want to tackle that first? maybe I could start with you, Dr. Howard. Initial thoughts on that. I think you covered some aspects of this, you and Chris. So either one.
Yeah, I'll just chime in real quickly. I mean, we need a paradigm shift. I mean, we've got to see the best and brightest in our young people, our young men. The bottom line, I think Brother Chris is just spot on. And I also say this, let's be clear. Skin color does not equate to consciousness. So just because we get Black folks in classroom doesn't mean that they see the best and brightest in our young folks. Sometimes they are the ones who are not the mentors, but the tormentors of our young people. So what has to change is just mindset, ideology, seeing the best and brightest, eradicating European sort of ways of how we define brilliance and intellect, and seeing and knowing and understanding sort of the cultural sort of beauty that our young people bring to school every single day. But it takes a huge uplifting change. And I want to shout out Brother Chris's program. I've seen his Young Kings before. He doesn't do it justice in this presentation. As amazing as he is in this format, when you meet these young brothers, when you interact with these young brothers, when you have conversation with these young brothers, you see their intellect, their confidence, their pride, their self-worth. It is something that I think needs to just get global spotlight.
Thank you, Dr. Howard. Chris, do you want to, Brother Chapman, do you want to tie into that?
You know, we are planting seeds that will become trees that will provide shade for children we haven't met yet. So I say this in the spirit of legacy. Children are who they see. So last night, when this crisis hit, we started a street team of young people. And young people were letting us know on so many different levels, adults were not tracking the trauma that they have been experiencing. I think if we want to create pipelines, connect with kids on your block, in your church, in your neighborhood, we just got to go reach them. And when they see that you're walking in your essence, that you are manifesting just greatness, I'm telling you, kids are going to want to do that. And last night I go downstairs, 2 of my sons have little study sessions with elementary school kings of a school that we had just adopted. And so I guess what I'm saying, less the formal, we just got to get back and get out. And children they gravitate to spirit. They gravitate to an aura of leadership more so than some of the formal structures. Because school, if we don't reset and reimagine school right now, shame on all of us. And so we have to just fundamentally move different. And so for me, I would just say it's get eye level with young people, and just as much as the way we AAU sports, which really kind of crushed recreational sports, but the way we go about youth sports and music and all love. But if we brought that tenacity and that, all of that flavor and all of that marketing and that language and sweat, all of it, I'm telling you, our young people would just, they would naturally want to manifest all of that and mirror and model. And so we're talking about something that a lot of times, many of us have never even experienced. So when your way into it is research, that don't necessarily, unless, you're really connected to your passion and purpose, that ain't gonna move the masses. We need to create a conspiracy of care bigger than just a teacher pipeline if it's around our livelihood as Black people. So for me, I'm just, now's the time.
I'll add one thing, Dr.
Yeah, we got time for one thing. We're up against it.
Okay, so that is just really a continued focus on equity. And I know that when we look at the way teachers are brought in, the way administrators are brought in, we look at the processes that are used for that. I harken back to what Shirley Weber said about Proposition 209 and affirmative action. I think that a lot of times our African Americans, when they come in, are either judged in a way that doesn't embody their experience as they're going through the process of being interviewed and being selected. And then once they are selected, the support that's needed is not given. So the question of equity as it permeates the hiring process, I think is something that needs to change.
No, thank you. Let's show our appreciation, virtual appreciation for all the panelists. Excellent job, extremely informative and practical. You outline things from the philosophical to the operational, that for school districts that really are about the business of increasing Black male presence on their at their schools. You gave all solid information about how they are able to do that. And I think listening to the brothers on this panel really embodies why it's significant to have Black male presence at our school sites, with that energy, with that spirit, that dedication, and being able to connect to our students in ways that no one else would be able to do other than having a Black male at our institution. So thank all of you. Thank all of the 101 attendees that are now motivated to continue to do good work and continue to create this paradigm shift that we need if we're going to dismantle white supremacy and institutional racism that has been a barrier far too long in the success of our students and in blocking the path for Black professionals in our school systems. So with that, see you all later. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
I'll drop the links for the survey and the link back into the original room in the chat. Thank you all.